Story 1. The Midnight Route. I used to love the way the city quieted after midnight. Streets thinned to ribbons of sodium light. Storefronts dozed. The river became a black seam stitching two halves of the world together. Driving the Route 97 night bus felt like being the sole lighthouse keeper on a cliff nobody visited. It paid just enough to keep my rent from slipping, and I liked having a job where my passengers were more fog than faces. On my first week, the dispatcher Ralph, a man with nicotine-stained mustache and a pocket full of peppermint candies, tapped a laminated card on the corkboard. Rules after 2:30 a.m. It read, "Don't pull over for unlisted stops. Don't check the back row unless someone rings. Don't accept transfers printed in blue ink." I laughed. Urban legends? Ralph didn't laugh back. "You'll be fine if you treat the late hours like deep water. Swim on top." Most nights were monotony made mechanical. A dishwasher dead on his feet who rode 3 stops past his home each shift. A nurse who slept open-mouthed with a lunchbox hug. A drunk who said "thank you" as if it were a Hail Mary. I learned their shapes before their names. The fog rode in on a Wednesday as I climbed Easton Hill. It wasn't fog like weather, more like fog like a crowd. The GPS screen froze at 2:31 a.m. The road signs on Easton read EASTON no matter how far I drove. The bus's cabin lights hummed too loudly, like insects near a bulb. That's when I saw the stop. There's no stop at Penn and Waverly, not on the paper route, and not in reality, and yet a shelter stood there, glass browned by years, a poster of a smiling family whose eyes had paled to blanks, a bench glossed with wet. A girl stood beneath the flickering tube. Young woman, really maybe 30. She wore a rain-dark dress that clung to her knees, and a cardigan heavy with water. Her hair made a dark river down her back. She didn't shiver. She didn't look up. Rule 1 itched between my shoulder blades. My hand moved anyway. "Break," doors hissed. The odor that came in with her wasn't rot. It was river metallic, old coins, the green of algae. She didn't tap a card, didn't flash a pass. She walked down the aisle with the slow certainty of someone filming a scene at half speed and sat in the back row, middle seat. The wet seeped into the vinyl. A dark crescent bloomed beneath her shoes. The bus felt colder. Each breath a stitched cloud. "Where to?" I asked, because drivers ask, because conversation makes the strange ordinary. She didn't answer. In the mirror, I caught the glint of her pupils too large. You know how reflections lag by a fraction when you're tired? This one didn't lag at all. It stared back, as if it had been staring there before I arrived. We moved. I passed 3 stops that should have been alive with late workers. But the shelters were empty, the time displays dead. The fog pressed the windows like palms. Somewhere behind me, a droplet fell from hair to seat to floor with the steady patience of a metronome. Drip, drip, drip. At 2:41, a man waved from Leon Street. I braked by muscle memory and opened the doors. He glanced down the aisle, saw the back row, and stumbled backward like he'd stepped into a freezer. "Next bus," he muttered, eyes not leaving her, voice tinny with panic. He ran. The radio crackled with static, then found Ralph's voice threaded through it. 97, copy? Copy. Don't add passengers on the Penn stretch after half past. I already did. Silence. Then, softly. Keep moving. Don't announce last stop. Don't make eye contact in the mirror. I didn't want to look. Of course I looked. Her face had changed shape, not in the way flesh changes, but in the way water changes. Features blurred by currents, eyes widened as if the lids were tired of the work. She raised her hands and smoothed her hair. When her fingers parted it, A thin eel of river weed clung between them and fell to the floor with a wet whisper. I drove the loop twice with no passengers getting on and the same one never getting off. The city became a carousel of the same blocks in different orders. A pair of stray dogs trotted alongside for a block, then the fog swallowed them like mouths. The clock on the dash ticked backward to 2:37, then forward to 2:38, then blinked 2:37 again. End of the line is a relief you earn with a lever. When I pulled into the depot lane, my palms were slick. I turned, forcing cheer into my tone. Last stop, empty seats. Dry vinyl except for a faint wet signature on the back row. On the floor, 7 coins sunk in a small puddle, as if they'd been lying at the bottom of a fountain for years. Ralph met me on the platform. He looked older than he had at 11:45. He opened his fist and showed me a curling bus transfer printed in blue ink. The date worn to ghosts. She tries to pay with these. He flicked it into the trash. Don't take them. Is it a staff? Who is she? Ralph chewed a peppermint until I thought his teeth would crack. One night, a bus took the river road while the bridge was under repair. A car clipped it. Nothing spectacular, just a glancing bump. Bus slid. Not even a full fall. Half the bus got out. A woman didn't. It was 2:37. The driver swore he saw her climb the stairs and find a seat. Some passengers swear she stepped off into the depot. Maybe she did both. That's how this sort of thing starts. I didn't sleep. At 10 a.m., I went to the river. Pelicans clustered at pylons. A skiff moved like a dark beetle. I leaned on the rail and thought about rules that are really doors. The coins I'd found were greened around the edges like old teeth. Night 3, she boarded again, same stop, same slow walk, same trailing wet. This time, a kid from the university was on board, drunk and invincible. Hey, he slurred, swaggering down the aisle. You okay back there? He reached a hand toward her shoulder. The bus lurched, though my foot was steady on the pedal. Every light inside dimmed. The kid's breath made white skeins. He stopped. The woman turned not her head, all of her torso, knees, feet, as if pivoting on a hidden dowel, and looked at his hand as you'd look at a fly. She didn't touch him. She merely blinked. For a heartbeat, I saw water sluice across the ceiling. When I blinked, it was dry again, and the kid stumbled to a seat and buried his face in his hoodie and sobbed like he hadn't in years. I started carrying a towel. After she'd leave, if you could call it leaving, I dabbed the back row until the cloth grew heavy. The smell followed me home. The copper of damp pennies. The bottom of dock moss sweetness that never quite leaves your hands. The last night I drove the 97, I broke a rule I didn't know I'd made. The fog was so dense in the depot lane, I had to nose the bus in like a ship through ice. She was there. She is always there. Once you've seen her, whether in the seat or in the mirror or in the idea of a mirror. I parked, killed the engine, and stood, my voice a thread. You missed your stop. Her head tilted. The coins on the floor chimed as the bus settled. I pointed to the front door, to the night beyond, where the depot lamps burned pits in the fog. If you tell me where, I'll take you. A moment shivered. Then she lifted one arm and pointed not to the door, not to any landmark but down, the bus floor, asphalt, earth, the river under everything. You want the bridge, I whispered. Her lips moved. The sound wasn't air. It was current. One word. Home. So I drove. Against company policy. Against sense. Against every story that ends with a driver found days later, engine idling, mouth full of river silt. Across barricades and blinking cones. Up the ramp, where the bridge lights sat like a string of cold moons. Halfway across, The fog drew back like a curtain. The water below was black glass. She stood no rustle of fabric, no footfall, and came to the fair line. Her dress stopped dripping. Her hair hung straight as ropes. She didn't look at me. She looked out. I eased the bus to the shoulder and opened the doors. The smell left first, then the cold. By the time I found the courage to turn, the aisle was empty. On the stepwell, 7 coins lay in a circle around a transfer printed in blue. The ink now clear enough to read. Penn and Waverly, 2, 37 amperes. M. I returned to the depot at 3:12. Ralph met me with 2 cups of coffee and eyes that knew too much. Sometimes, he said, the route lets go if you do the thing it wanted in the first place. I still drive, day shifts now. But some nights when I pass a shelter and the poster's eyes have washed to white, I feel fog gathering under my ribs, and I keep my gaze off the back row of any bus I ride. Some passengers are water moving by another name, and some stops keep their own time. Story 2. The passenger who never got off. Storm rain has a way of making a city honest. It strips sound down to tire hiss and gutter song, and every face tilts down into the blur. That night, the 402 might as well have been a submarine. The windows were filmed with breath. The aisle lights drew thin bones along the floor. I sat 2 seats behind the rear door, the safe zone between escape and engine heat, earbuds in but no music playing, so I could listen without looking like I was listening. We were 8 in all, front to back. A woman in scrubs, hugging a Tupperware like a warm animal. A man in a neon work vest with mud up to his knees. A couple sharing a soaked scarf. A teenager with eyeliner like armor. Me. An elderly man with a folded umbrella and the patience of stone. Behind him, the last row was empty. The driver was a gray shape in the mirror, his jaw square with focus. The bus braked at an unlit stop, door side open, rain spoke on the steps. No one boarded. The driver didn't move. He watched the back in the mirror for 3 long seconds, shut the doors, and pulled away. The nurse pressed her lips into a line. The old man crossed himself without drama. 3 blocks later, it happened again. Brake, doors, rain, nothing. But I felt it then, the temperature dropping the way it does when you open a freezer and forget to breathe. My breath made ghosts. The couple's whispering stitched itself into prayers. "Don't look behind you," the driver said without turning. His voice reached us like it had marched down the aisle first. I failed immediately. I looked. He stood in the center of the back row, hands softly hanging, fingers curled like he'd been mid-gesture and forgot what he'd meant to say. His hair lay in strips against his skull. His jacket denim once was darker in patches, heavy with water. He wasn't dramatic. He simply was, the way a stain is. I whipped around so fast my neck cracked. Every small sound became a nail. The wipers thunk, the wet squeal of tires, the plastic bag under my seat, breathing in and out with the bus's motion. We passed 3 scheduled stops without pausing. The driver's knuckles had gone white piano keys. "He rides in storms," the old man murmured, not to us, to himself. "Used to in my day, too." "What is he?" the teen whispered. The old man considered. "A person who wasn't done yet." At the next red light, the doors opened of their own accord, with a little resigned hiss of a sigh. Rain stepped in without a body. The bus exhaled frost. I knew without looking that the figure had taken 1 step forward. You could feel the air draw tight. "Keep your eyes front," the driver said, a command worn smooth by repetition. "If you count his steps, he notices." We moved. I tried to glue my gaze to the route map above the driver-colored lines like veins, but my eyes kept dragging to the rearview mirror. In it, I saw the driver's eyes, and beyond them, the back row. The shape in the back wasn't a smear in reflection. It was clearer there than in the world. Another stop. Another step. "Who left you?" the nurse asked quietly, not turning. The driver's mouth twitched. "Doesn't matter anymore," he said. All he hears is left. We curved along the river road, the rain thick as beads on strings. Something cold slicked the back of my neck, a caress made of kelp. I swallowed the sound. The teenager squeezed my forearm, nails moons on my skin. "Don't," she mouthed. And I understood she'd ridden this route before. At Harbor and 3rd, where the bus always stuttered for pedestrians that never materialized after midnight, the doors hissed. A gust rolled in that smelled like fairy ropes and pennies. I didn't turn, but in the glass I saw him 2 rows closer. No splash from his steps, no drip trail, as if the wet belonged to the air, not to him. "Who did this to you?" The neon vest man called, anger a shield. "Tell me who, and I'll—" "Don't offer bargains," the driver snapped, for the first time afraid. He thinks anybody who speaks up is the one. The light at Bridgeview turned green, then green again. A loop error like the night had hiccuped. Somewhere behind us, the elderly man began to recite a prayer in a language that shook like a small bell. The bus's frame resonated. My stop was 5 minutes ahead, then 10, then right now. As if co-conspiring with dread, the bus slowed. The driver jumped the curb as if the pavement burned. "No exits," he said, voice low. "Not until he chooses. Everyone stays until he does." The doors ignored him and sighed open anyway. The thing in the aisle was close enough that I could hear fabric whisper when it moved. My entire attention existed in my periphery, a world made of not looking. A cold dropped down my spine, like someone laying a wet finger along each vertebra. My body took over. I bolted. I don't know why I ran. Panic has no why. I tore down the steps and into the cleaver of rain. The driver shouted, and the nurse shouted, and the night shouted, and then the world did the thing that haunts me most. It lagged. For maybe half a second the sound of the bus continued, the light continued, the driver's yell continued, but I didn't. My feet landed, and there was nothing under them. Not pavement, not water. Just a blank like the city had been erased under an eraser's first pass. Then I was on the sidewalk on my hands, palms stinging, rain filling my mouth. The 402 idled like a beast thinking. The doors pulled in. Through the glass I saw my seat empty, and behind it, the reflection of my own face in the window. Only it wasn't my face. The water running down it was inside the glass, falling upward. The driver jerked the bus into motion, tires shrieking. The figure in the aisle turned its head first time, and though I never saw its face directly, I knew the not face of a person drowned. Features floated slightly free of their hinges, as if water had taught them to drift. The bus vanished down the black ribbon. The sound went with it. I lay there until the rain softened and strangers became brave enough to be strangers again. I took a taxi home and burned my clothes in the bathtub with rubbing alcohol like superstition could undo geometry. 2 weeks later, I tried to find the driver to thank him for not letting the route finish what it wanted. The transit office receptionist tilted her head. 402, she said. We retired that number 5 years ago after a multi-vehicle pileup on the bridge. Fog. Heavy rain. Bus went into the river. Driver didn't make it. None of them did. Then who? I began. And she was already shaking her head, like you do for customers who tell dumb lies. On storm nights, I still hear doors sigh open on empty streets. I keep my eyes forward. If I ride, I sit over the wheel well, where the engine grumbles, like a big dog heat between me and the idea of water hands flat, breath small. Somewhere, the passenger who never got off is still inching forward, stop by stop, looking for the one who left him. If he touches your shoulder, you don't feel fingers. You feel the weight of river. The trick, the driver had said, is not to count the steps, but I always do. Story 3. Last stop, nowhere. Long-distance buses are limbos with seatbelts. You tell yourself it's cheaper than the train, more comfortable than rideshare, less lonely than driving. You forget that limbos have rules they don't write on tickets. Route 19 left at 11:10 p.m. from a terminal that smelled like coffee filtered through shoe leather. I had a window seat and the righteous fatigue of a person who believes sleep is a form they can file. People were a landscape. A young man in a suit tapping an apology into his phone. A woman with a guitar case and a ring of keys as big as a weapon. A kid traveling alone with a tag clipped to his hoodie that said UM, unaccompanied minor, in serious letters. A veteran with a buzz cut and a paperback titled Survival Psychology. A grandmother with a floral bag that wheezed when she zipped it. Me, all edges, sanded down by road. For the first hour, the bus was eggshell light, and the world outside a smear of farmland and dark. We stopped in a town whose main street had shut its eyes for the night. The driver, a man with shoulders like a coat rack and a throat permanently tuned to AM radio, counted heads in the mirror and smiled at me like I'd asked for it. "You'll get there," he said to the bus, as much as to any of us. We didn't. At 12:23, the bus eased to the shoulder for no reason the world provided. The engine idled like a big cat purring, then coughed, then went quiet. The lights stayed on, humming. No one panicked right away. Phones rose, bars fell. Outside, there was nothing. No farmhouses, no rest area lights, not even reflective paint. The highway had been swallowed by a version of night that didn't care about electricity. The driver stood, swiped his head down, and said, "Stay put. The way you say, sit to a dog, you hope obeys." He stepped down and was gone into the slice of darkness outside the door. 5 minutes is patience. 10 is manners. 15 is a dare. At 20, the suit stood and made a speech about refunds. At 22, the veteran said he'd go look. At 23, the bus solved the problem for us. When the veteran's shoe touched the asphalt, he didn't thud or slip. He blinked out like a frame cut from film. His backpack fell in. The kid said, "What?" and didn't finish the word. The grandmother started praying in Spanish. The woman with the guitar case wrapped the strap around her wrist as if it could moor her to our world. We didn't argue about staying inside anymore. The ads above the window's insurance, phone plans, a cheerful poster about washing your hands like you were trying to remove a curse throbbed and then didn't exist. In their place were panels of writing I couldn't keep in my head. When my eyes skated off the curves, I tasted lightning. The UM kid asked if it was a puzzle. No one answered. The lights hiccuped. When they steadied, the seats were fewer. I counted fast, like counting could. Pulled them back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. 5. No. 4. The suit was gone. So was his phone, which hurt more than it should have. The grandmother's floral bag wheezed and then sighed flat, empty as a burst lung, though her body sat upright, eyes open to a horizon only she saw. The woman with the guitar case began to pick a string without opening the lid. It sounded like wire being tightened, a room being tuned. "You hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" "The station between stations." The bus moved. No driver. The wheel corrected itself like a trick coin returning to center. The world outside wasn't road. It was tunnel, but not dug by hands, more like subtraction, like something had eaten the dark into a shape and we were the seed it wanted. The windows didn't show scenery. They showed versions of us in pains, each a little off. Me asleep, me without glasses, me as a kid pressing my nose to glass to watch snow. The kid pressed his palms to the window. His reflection did not. It smiled. The intercom clicked. A voice spoke that had too many harmonics in it to be just one mouth. "Next stop," it said in a calm you wanted to obey. "Nowhere." "Don't pull the cord," the guitar woman said quickly when the kid's hand shot up. "3 tugs only if it says terminal. Anything else, you bring us deeper." "How do you know that?" I asked. She shrugged, like someone admitting they'd been here before and it hadn't gone well. "You pick it up if you ride enough nights." The book in the veteran's seat turned its own pages. "Panic kills in 3 ways," a header read, and then the page blurred so fast it made me dizzy. I took out my notebook because ritual comforts and wrote our names on a page, like I was the clerk of a courtroom. Me, Lena, guitar woman, Nina, UM, kid, Owen, grandma, Lupe. The last name I wrote by reflex, even though she had stopped blinking. The bus slowed to show us things. A roadside diner flickered in the windows, neon blinking, "Eat, eat, eat," in a language camera's dream. Inside a diner sat a dozen passengers turned slightly away, as if about to pivot toward the camera, but never quite doing it. One had my coat on, another had the driver's hat. The intercom purred. Nowhere. The bus did not stop. "Why us?" Owen whispered. "Because we are between," Nina said. "People who ride at night are always a little unhooked. The world pulls at our laces." The floor flaxed underfoot. A subtle tide. I saw then that the aisle wasn't wood and rubber anymore. It was a narrow pier, and just beneath it, separated by a millimeter of glass or nerve, something moved that had more joints than a thing should. I lifted my shoes behind my heels like a child, toes gripping for balance. Lupe's rosary clicked like teeth. When fear plateaus, it makes room for curiosity. I stood, slow, and went to the front. The driver's seat was empty but warm. The wheel shifted on its own in tiny corrections, like muscle memory belongs to objects as well as bodies. I reached for the radio. The dial spun without friction, and all I found were other versions of the bus. "If anyone hears this, don't step off. Pull the cord 3 times at the diner." I said 3, not once. Scream silence. The cord hung like a vein. I nodded to Nina. She nodded back. Owen clutched the back of a seat until his knuckles shone, then shut his eyes. Lupe lifted her face and spoke to someone I hoped was listening. We waited. The world outside began to resolve into a shape we recognized. A lit building standing idea, straight against the dark. The diner, but ours, not a window echo. The parking lot had puddles arranged like constellations. The sign over the door buzzed, D-Ner, 1 letter devoured. Inside, a woman wiped a counter with the brisk mercy of those who have seen it all and chosen kindness anyway. "Now," Nina said. I pulled the cord once, the polite request of regular routes. The intercom laughed. I felt it in my teeth. 3, Nina said. Together. We took a breath like divers and yanked. 1, 2, 3. The bell dinged in 3 distinct, old-fashioned notes, the sound of a city when newspapers were mourning animals and milk came cold in glass. The bus's motion smoothed. The tunnel widened into road. The engine sounded like an engine again, not a throat. We glided into the lot and stopped with a sigh so ordinary it made me cry. Tires, brakes, the smell of hot dust. I turned to the cabin to count as reflex, superstition, and my pen lifted itself into my hand. I wrote again without meaning to. Lupe. The seat where she'd sat was empty. Her rosary looped around nothing. The doors opened. We stayed put. We wait for the driver, Nina said. Even if it takes a while, we don't step first. A shadow coalesced in the aisle and resolved into a man rubbing his eyes with 2 fingers like he'd botched a nap. The driver, he wore the same hat. He looked at us like a king walking into a treasury he hadn't realized he owned. "Rough night?" he asked, exactly as the driver had earlier. Exactly as every driver does when piloting relief. His smile was a copy, edges a hair too crisp. We let him step down first. The 3 of us followed. The diner's bell jangled. Coffee smell hit us like salvation. The waitress took us in with a glance that read our history faster than any book. "You okay?" she asked, pouring without asking. "You look like you took the long road." "What road is this?" Owen asked, voice small with wonder and terror. "Same as ever," she said. "Depends which direction you came from." I turned to point at the bus proof, witness, curse, and found the lot empty. Wet tire arcs held for a second like signatures, then faded. When I paid, the bills in my wallet looked the same as always, but felt older, like paper that had crossed many palms. The clock over the grill said 6:02 a.m. The sky had a bruise of dawn. At home, I tried to find Route 19 online and landed on message board threads old enough to crack when clicked. A handful of posts. Don't pull the cord unless it says terminal. Don't step off first. Keep names. A link to a newspaper story from 12 years ago. Bus vanishes between exits. No trace of passengers. Photo of a diner I recognized, standing against a different century of dark. Sometimes, driving the Beltway late, I glimpse a coach in the distance where no coach should be. Interior lit like a fragile idea. Faces turned towards something only they can see. If you ever find yourself on a night bus that opens to a darkness that isn't weather, count names, not heads. Don't let the driver be the first to go missing or the first to return. Pull the cord 3 times when the world offers you coffee and a bell over a door. And if the intercom purrs next stop, nowhere, pinch yourself mean. The places that call themselves nowhere are always the hungriest somewheres of all.